All right, Brody Miller from The Athletic joining us here, top of the hour, second hour, brought to you by Go Chevrolet. Sorry for making you wait, buddy. Brody Miller every Wednesday with us. Good morning. How are you?
Doing well. How are you guys today?
Doing good, man. Happy belated Thanksgiving, early Merry Christmas. Jack Besh. We were talking about
so
Jack.
Polite.
We were talking about Jack Besh.
Sorry for making you wait.
That's right.
Happy Thanksgiving. Merry Christmas.
Bunch of pricks around here.
Man. I don't know
Thank you,
what
Brody.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brody. Thank you. Thank you. Your hair looks like shit.
Yeah, there you go.
It does.
It does. We were talking a little bit about Jack Besh. How do you evaluate Besh's sophomore season here? Came in with a ton of expectation, dealt with some injury, hadn't played as much as he'd like, but looks like they're trying to work him back in. Where do you see him here on his progression?
Yeah, it's obviously not been the year he would hope for, but I don't also overreact to it just because in a lot of ways, first off you start with, he's had multiple injuries throughout the year. I believe he was dealing with a concussion at some point. It's been a weird year for him from the jump, right? And then this passing game has not exactly been the best for a lot of receivers really, showing their tape, breaking out. I mean, the first few weeks at least especially. And I think it was just kind of a situation where, okay, he's probably fourth right now in the pecking order, maybe fifth. And I just think it was a crowded room. He's beat up. The passing game with Jayden Daniels hasn't been exactly conducive to everybody popping off and all that. And yeah, I think it hasn't been the year you'd want. But I think I heard you at the tail end of that kind of saying you're not worried about Jack Besh. And I'd probably say I'm in the same boat. I mean, one, get him healthy. But two, next year, hypothetically, that receiving room, the pecking order is a little clear. The staff trusts him. He's like the guy the staff trusts and loves as much as anybody. And I think that but come next year, I mean, he'll probably be that clear possession guy. A Malik Neighbors, Brian Thomas, Jack Besh trio, assume, outside of transfers or whatever. That's a really good, well-rounded receiving corps. So, yeah, not the year you'd want, not the year I know he would want, but I don't think I'm hitting a panic button or anything. I think I start with getting healthy, and two, I think that passing game will probably be more cohesive next year, regardless of who the quarterback is.
Talking about last Saturday night in College Station, what was your takeaway from LSU?
Yeah, it's tough to put your finger on because it's not like you look at that game and saw it was exposing something that you were already worried about. Now, I think it exposed that, LSU was probably limited from the jump. They weren't some great team, and this kind of showed, guys, they're good, they're not great. But there's not the ways they got beat were areas that you were concerned about. It was a weird, out-of-character domination, and that's what's so strange about it. That's what Brian Kelly, I think, was kind of struggling with after the game, where he kept saying, I can't put my finger on it, because, they got just destroyed in the run game. I don't think of that as a major issue for LSU. They got, just demolished on one-on-ones and some of those deep balls. Well, that's more just credit to A&M making great plays. I don't think the corners played poorly. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff that I don't know if you are see, this tells you about this team. It really felt like, and I think Kelly's talked about, there wasn't the fire you'd want. There wasn't the focus you'd want. And I'm not going to get into look ahead or whatever. I don't know what really happened there. Maybe Thanksgiving week. Who knows? But it just seemed like that team wasn't locked in a way because these were out of character problems. And that works multiple ways. That works in terms of you could tell yourself, see, these aren't the major issues, and they should, in theory, be able to bounce back and be back to who they were the previous 4 or 5 weeks against Georgia. Totally possible. Or it could say this might be a team that is getting kind of fried after a very emotional, kind of had to be locked in every week season. I think there's both possibilities to both.
Let's look ahead this week. How do you like the chances of LSU? How do you measure up this game going into it with, Georgia kind of being wire to wire, number one all season long?
I don't love LSU's chances. I think the spread's at 17 by now, and I think some projections that I trust a lot have it more toward 20. I think what's tough about it for LSU is the things LSU wants to do, Georgia's probably just better at. Mm-hmm. And that's usually, the worst recipe. I look at the offense, and I think this offense has made huge strides. I like LSU's offense. I think it's very underrated. I also think Georgia is made to just make that brutal. LSU is a very good running game. Georgia's run defense is even better than almost every metric. Jayden Daniels is one of the best scramblers and really just become just a good quarterback. Well, Georgia has the kind of bodies that are almost made to spy him and take away that ability to run sideline to sideline. That's a perfect matchup. The other side, it's not the other side, but LSU's offense took its big turn and made a leap once they kind of figured out, hey, trust the receivers. Let those receivers win a one-on-one because they're going to win a one-on-one against almost every cornerback. They're that good. Well, I'm not saying they're going to lose them, but Georgia's corners are the kind of guys you probably don't want to just trust a one-on-one against. That gets neutralized. So I think I worry about that. On the other side, yeah, you have a chance. You have a chance to make this an ugly, low-scoring game if you play your best game. Georgia's offense is better than people realize. It is like a top 5 or 10 offense. It's very efficient. It's just not like sexy and exciting. But yeah, like LSU's D-line when they're playing their best, not like they played against A&M, can stop a really good run game. They can they can hold their own on the line of scrimmage. I'm a big Stetson Bennett defender, but at the same time, there are ways that you could, like, it's not a passing game where you're like, oh man, Hendon Hooker, what are you going to do? You can win a lot of those battles on the outside. You have to figure out a game plan for the tight ends, Brock Bowers, Darnell Washington, and whatnot. But, I think Kelly talked about probably playing a good amount of zone there. Also, like, just to get devil's advocate, LSU does kind of have bodies that match up that could compete, I guess is a better way to put it. Like, how many guys do they have that are basically corner safety hybrids? Your Jay Wards, Greg Brooks, Jarek Bernard-Converse, all these guys that can play both, and which basically tells you they're good enough in coverage, but also physical enough to play safety and stop the run and all that. Maybe they can kind of get physical with these tight ends. Or shoot, Harold Perkins isn't really there in pass coverage yet, but he was kind of like put in a lab to probably hold his own, in man coverage against one of these tight ends. So there's ways the defense can make this ugly and make it competitive. It's the other side that, especially with Daniels banged up, you have to worry. But, it's LSU. You're good enough to win any game on the right night.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about Daniels and what you've learned of his status, his health, and what could be a contingency plan here if he does go down. Is it just straight to Garrett Nussmeier?
I would assume, but I mean, that's a good question. Yeah. Obviously, his ankle, it's limited. I'm sure they'll find a way to have him go, but I just also don't know if he's going to be. I mean, his superpower is that quickness, let alone against this Georgia team where. Now, I'm not going to say rely on it, but you may have to rely on that speed. So there's a lot. One, even if he goes down, to your point, or something happens, that hurts you. But two, like, if he's just not himself, that limits this offense huge. I would assume Garrett Nussmeier would be next up. One, just he's the next scholarship quarterback up. But two, this game was always a little bit about having a punch, right? Like, Georgia is better. You need a punch, like a way to kind of, level the playing field a little. And Garrett Nussmeier, if he's good, Garrett Nussmeier has that gunslinger thing and is an incredible passer that he could maybe make some plays and do some big things and really open up this passing offense against Georgia. So I would assume he's next up, but I do have to probably ask around a bit on that more.
Brody Miller from The Athletic, hit him on Twitter at Brody A. Miller. LSU taking on Georgia this Saturday in the SEC title game. Brody, do you get an idea of how the coaching staff will manage the schedule over the next couple of days and weeks with game on the horizon, recruiting signing day in a couple of Wednesdays, and look, their opponents having kind of this week to visit recruits where LSU is in game prep, and then, like Lloyd said, transfer portal stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I know Kelly gave a quick answer saying that, they kind of use the bye week to kind of get ahead on some stuff with the portal and whatnot. Because, and I know I think the beauty of the kind of the time you're in now is they have such a large personnel staff. They have such a behind the scenes staff that those guys are already laying the foundation, getting things ready, already talking to guys all the time, that it's not as if LSU's focusing on this game, and that is focusing on this game and it's just not caught up on recruiting and things like that. But yeah, there is going to be a slight, 5-10% catch up going on. But I think in regard to, say, the portal, I believe they already have some semblance of a plan and already kind of know which guys they're going for. And I'm not accusing of tampering, but maybe, there's some feelings of some guys you have a good chance with already by asking the people around them, stuff like that. And, in terms of the other recruiting, they're on top of that. I don't think they're in trouble with grand recruiting and all that, but there will be a catch up. I know that the second this game's over, I believe they're going into full recruiting mode, and the next 2 to 3 weeks will be kind of chaos for the staff. But it's a disadvantage recruiting being in this game, but at the same time, it's an advantage because you are on national TV playing for the SEC title.
What do you make of Hugh Freeze coming back to the league?
I I'm always team what makes the SEC fun. So that's always my quick answer. It's just like, yeah, man, let's get more personalities. Let's get more polarizing people that everyone wants to argue over. But yeah, it's tough because I thought Lane Kiffin, for example, the big thing with Auburn, right, is the boosters, the alignment, can you get everyone on the same page? And I think that even if you have your own questions about Lane Kiffin, which I do sometimes, I felt pretty confident that booster base would be so gung-ho about Lane Kiffin, they would be just all in on it, and that he would probably thrive there. And I think Hugh Freeze is a very good coach. I think it's like because he has this kind of all shucks, and just kind of careless, reckless dumbness sometimes that people think he's not a good coach or that he's kind of an airhead, but I think he's smarter than that. He's just careless. And you look at his track record, he has genuinely won everywhere. What he's done at Liberty is almost even more impressive than what he did at Ole Miss in some ways. And I think in theory he'll do really well there because one, the resources are coming. That's been clear. The NIL commitment is there. We've all heard about that. But I think you have to worry about the booster thing, like we just said, is so big. And the fact that it's already divided over this hire, and there are a lot of people genuinely against it, that makes you worry. But still, in the grand scheme of things, yeah, Hugh Freeze is a guy that can get Auburn back to what it wants to be. That's just the reality. And yeah, that does kind of sting for, other programs because for 2 or 3 years now, Auburn's been, it's not Auburn. And that should be a win on your schedule. And I think now the West just gets a little bit harder every day.
Brody, have you ever heard of a booster club or a team taking away a coach's phone before they even hired him?
Wait, I don't know why in the back of my mind I'm kind of thinking, wasn't there a coach that got something taken away? I'm blanking on this.
Dennis
but no.
Francione? No, Mike Price.
Mike Price. Got his job taken away.
Right. The company credit card taking away.
Jeez, that's incredible. Yeah, I can't, man. That's just, man. And yeah, that's the worst part of all this. Everyone talks about hey, man, it's one thing to the escorts, it's one thing to, the cheating or all that. It's the DMing of a sexual assault survivor repeatedly that definitely is not a good look
go
for
to work.
Right.
Yeah,
right,
that's
right,
where
right.
it's you should get mad about that.
Go check the
I
toilet.
understand.
There's definitely a Walter White burner in the back of it.
Here's your polo. Give me your phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's no chance that Hugh Freeze has his phone, his social media taken away and just oh no, guess I can't do anything on social media. No, man, that guy's got a few accounts going. He'll come back. Don't worry.
It's like a kid. You have to, when you catch him smoking cigarettes, you make him smoke a whole carton. See if you still like this.
Chain smoking.
Did that happen to you?
No. Yeah,
It just wasn't. It wasn't cigarettes.
It didn't take,
Brody.
It disappointed him more.
Yeah, it was LSD. Just never come off of it.
Damn, he's still high.
Brody, what did you make of the top 4 last night, and how do you think this weekend affects the top 4 coming up?
Yeah, because it's if you just view it from a pure just probabilities, right? One of USC or TCU could lose. So that's just, I think both have probably 55 to 60% chances. So one of them will probably lose. And that's where it gets really juicy because I know Ross Dellinger and a lot of others have been kind of team TCU's in no matter what. That they think that even if they lose, they're in. And I hope that's true because I think they've earned it. I think they've done it. But there's a lot of fear in me that's hey, because I'm not that high on Ohio State. I think, the 3 times they've played teams that have talent that match up to them, they have flat out struggled. And I know, maybe it's you win the games and you don't. We should be nicer to them. But the committee loves Ohio State. They always have. They love their, per play metrics and all that. So it's I have a feeling that Ohio State's going to – if anyone loses, I think Ohio State's in. And I have a real fear that if both those teams lose, USC and TCU, which is totally possible, I do have a genuine fear that both Ohio State and Alabama will get in, which I don't care, but I don't think either team is good enough, let alone do I think they deserve it, which are 2 separate things, but I think both are true in this case. So yeah, I do think one of those 2, USC or TCU, will lose, and I think Ohio State's next up. I'm not convinced TCU's in no matter what, just because this whole last 6 weeks of the rankings, they've basically been proving they are not that high on TCU. When they were under 8-0, they were still you're 6th or 7th. So yeah, I hope I'm wrong though, because I think they've earned it.
Brody, give me an synopsis of LSU year 1 under Brian Kelly now that you have this amount of body of work and they're going to Atlanta this week for the league title. Where is the state of the program now here, year 1 in Kelly right now?
Yeah, I think you have to be thrilled with it in so many ways, just because the things that in our head would probably be like, okay, that's going to take 2 or 3 years. The boring accountability process, all that stuff that we're sick of talking about, that stuff probably takes time. And I think you have to be excited because that stuff is proving itself already. And I know that's like the stuff that's not visible and hard for fans to be like, what do you mean by that? Like, I don't want to get excited about that. But I give the example of them losing Saturday, and I mean that in a good way. This was never a great team. This was a pretty good team. And the fact that they were 9-2 and won the West was the more impressive part. It's not that they're this great team. It's the fact that they're an okay team and they're finding ways to win. They won the West. They're beating teams that are better than them. They're getting better each week. That's the most fun part, and that's why you should be excited about the future of this team. So the fact that they can lose Saturday is not like this wasn't good or that this was a mess. It's proof of how impressive the other 11 was. And that's the way I view it. Because guess what? LSU could have lost to Arkansas, and they could have lost to Auburn, and this one they finally lost. And it's a reversion to the mean. That happens. They went 9-3, and I know everyone's been saying this all week, but like, you would have taken that. And so I think I look back on the season, and I hope people look back on it even more in a few years and say, like, this was an overachievement. But even more than overachievement, it was an establishment of the things that you hope they're building on come year 3 when they're competing for playoffs and stuff. That, hey, this team's tough. This team gets better in fourth quarters. This team adjusts really well, and their leaders are strong, and they have an accountability, and their best players are back on the field in a way that they weren't the last few years because so many guys had off the field issues and stuff like that. So I think you have to give it an A, maybe not an A+ because there were some shaky moments, sure, but you give it an A because, man, the future's really bright that it's proving they know what they're doing. And the recruiting class, even if it's like losing a few guys right now, it still should be a very good class that is probably better than we all thought it would be in January, even if they lose a few guys. So, yeah, man, I'm pretty high on Kelly and what he's done year 1.
Last one, I'll get you out of here. Do you expect to spend New Year's in Orlando? Do you have LSU? I know Jerry Palm has them in the Citrus Bowl.
Yeah.
Is that where you kind of feel them going? Yeah, no, I do.
I know. I'm never like sports writer, like tell them send me to the bowl I want guy. But man, like going from like you're going to a New Year's Six, either you're in like Cotton Bowl or Sugar Bowl where I don't have to travel to going to Citrus Bowl. Man, that one stings. Yes, as of now, I think Citrus Bowl is probably the most likely scenario. It's just hard. I don't think New Year's Six, unless like maybe there's a world where they play this incredible game and lose by 3, where the committee's like you're still really high on them and you give them the New Year's. It's just not really likely, especially with Bama and Tennessee just going to be ranked higher. So I think Citrus Bowl's next up, and that's probably where they're headed for the 3rd time in like 7 years or something.
Crazy, man. And then opener for next year, right back in it, right back to Orlando.
Just stay, Brody. You can just stay in Orlando.
It's like LSU's new Atlanta.
It really is. God, I'm not like complaining, but I don't want to go to Orlando that often.
It sounds like you're complaining.
If the Athletic is listening, I'm not complaining.
Brody, good to see you, buddy. Thank you.
Thanks as always, guys. Take care. My hair looks great. Screw you.
Merry Christmas. Yeah, that's right. At Brody A. Miller on Twitter.